A single word could end your life, not because of what you did, but because of what you might have said. In an empire ruled by absolute terror, silence was survival. And even silence wasn't safe enough. Neighbors reported neighbors. Children were taught to report their own parents. A wrong glance, a hesitant laugh, an unspoken doubt, any of it could make you vanish overnight, into a place no one ever spoke about again. Millions lived like this, not for months, but for decades. Under one ruler's iron will, an entire population learned to perform loyalty every single day, because the alternative was disappearance. Forbidden thoughts became crimes. Trust became a weapon, and fear became the only language everyone understood. This is the story of a leader who did not need armies to conquer a nation. He only needed fear. He turned ordinary people into instruments of his own control, and turned an entire society into a prison without walls. How does one man convince millions to police themselves? How does terror become invisible, woven so deep into daily life that no one remembers what freedom felt like? By the end of this story, you will understand exactly how it was done, and why, in some form, it is still happening today, somewhere, right now, hidden behind a smiling official portrait. Picture a nation rebuilding after collapse, its people exhausted, desperate for order, willing to trade freedom for the illusion of safety. This is fertile ground for a tyrant. In capitals across history, men like this rose the same way, promising stability, promising protection from chaos, promising an end to suffering. In exchange, they asked for only one thing: obedience. At first, it seemed reasonable. Curfews, loyalty pledges, a registry of citizens, small sacrifices to prevent instability. But behind closed doors, a machine was being built. A machine designed not to protect the people, but to watch them. Secret police units expanded into every district. Informant networks stretched into schools, factories, even families. Loyalty was no longer proven through action. It was proven through betrayal. Citizens were encouraged, then required, to report suspicious behavior. Diaries were read. Letters were intercepted. Conversations in coffee houses were recorded by listeners planted among the crowd. Anyone who questioned the leader's decisions vanished within days, sometimes hours. Official records described these disappearances euphemistically: relocated, reassigned, sent for re-education. The truth was buried in unmarked files, sealed for decades. And here is what almost no one expected. Many of the informants were not paid agents of the state at all. They were ordinary people, terrified for their own survival, turning in friends, co-workers, even spouses, just to prove they themselves were loyal enough to be spared. The terror wasn't only enforced from above. It had been planted inside the population itself, growing quietly in every household, every workplace, every whispered conversation behind closed curtains. And once fear takes root that deeply, it no longer needs an army to sustain it. It sustains itself. The deeper you dig, the more this story defies belief. Regional administrators were not told to search for real enemies of the state. They were handed quotas, a required number of arrests to fulfill every single month, regardless of whether guilt existed at all. If an officer failed to reach his number, he became a target himself. So people were arrested at random: a shopkeeper who complained about food prices, a teacher who forgot to display the leader's portrait, a father who whispered a joke at dinner. Confessions were manufactured through exhaustion, isolation, and psychological breakdown. Prisoners signing statements admitting to crimes that never happened, simply to make the interrogations stop. Trials, when they occurred, lasted minutes. Verdicts were often decided before the accused ever entered the room. Entire settlements were relocated to remote labor camps, families split apart, children placed in state institutions, and taught to forget their parents' names. And here is the detail that changes everything. Internal records, uncovered only decades later, revealed that the leader personally reviewed and approved top lists of thousands of names marked for execution, often annotating them by hand. Not delegated, not distant, deliberate, direct, and documented in his own handwriting. Meanwhile, propaganda broadcasts told the outside world a different story entirely, of prosperity, of unity, of a population that adored its leader. Photographs were staged. Radio addresses were scripted for foreign ears. While one reality was being broadcast to the world, an entirely different reality was unfolding behind sealed borders, where testimony, when it finally emerged, described starvation, forced confessions, and disappearances so common they became background noise, an accepted, unremarkable part of daily life. Neighbors learned not to ask where a missing family had gone. Children learned not to ask why a classroom seat sat empty, and an entire generation learned that survival meant asking nothing at all. When the regime finally collapsed, the true scale of what happened emerged slowly, and it was worse than most had imagined. Mass graves were uncovered in forests and along old rail lines. Sealed state archives, once opened, revealed meticulous records of the machinery of fear: arrest logs, interrogation transcripts, execution orders signed in the same steady hand. Survivors, many silent for their entire lives, finally spoke, describing years spent doubting even their own families, afraid that a spouse or a child might be the one who reported them. Historians still debate the exact death toll, but estimates for regimes built on this model of engineered fear reach into the millions. Some of the officials responsible were eventually tried publicly for crimes against their own people. Others quietly slipped away, resettled under new names in distant countries, living out peaceful lives while their victims, families were left with nothing but unmarked graves and unanswered questions. The chilling truth is that very few of the informants, the ordinary neighbors and co-workers who fed the machine, were ever held accountable at all. And this story is not simply history. Surveillance systems today, powered by data instead of informants, echo the same core principle. When people believe they are always being watched, they begin to police themselves before anyone else has to. The tools have changed. The psychology has not. Understanding what happened here is not about looking backward at a closed chapter. It's about recognizing the warning signs before they return in a new form, wearing a different face, promising the same false safety in exchange for the same forbidden silence. What happened in the shadows of that regime did not stay buried forever, but it took generations and countless untold stories before the truth could finally surface into the light. Fear, once it becomes normal, stops feeling like fear at all. It becomes routine. It becomes just how things are. That is the darkest lesson history keeps teaching us, over and over, in different countries, under different names. Tyranny rarely announces itself with violence first. It arrives quietly, disguised as order, as unity, as protection, and by the time people recognize what it truly is, speaking against it has already become dangerous. The leaders change, the uniforms change, but the method stays exactly the same. Convince enough people to watch each other, and you never have to watch them yourself. So ask yourself honestly, if you lived under this kind of silence, would you have spoken? Or would you have stayed quiet, just to survive? Would you have reported someone you loved, if it meant your children stayed safe another day? Tell me what you would have done in the comments below. History remembers those who stayed silent, just as clearly as it remembers those who didn't. And if this story moved you, subscribe, because there are more buried chapters of history still waiting to be exposed, and some of them are darker than anything you have seen yet.